on the Bob Marley One Love movie. This movie was the best biopic I have ever seen in my life. This movie gets a 10 out of 10, 100 stars, 5 stars. Like, y'all need to go and see this movie. Now, me being, a multicultural and international music lover, I knew of a lot of the songs that they played during the movie. Like, every little thing, it's gonna be alright. The one love, and then we're jamming, 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 jamming in the name of the Lord. I knew that one. And then there was another song that they were playing. Like, this film was just so nostalgic. It was just so fluid, and it was just so spiritually inclined. And I love this, especially for the African traditional religions. The Rastafarian movement was through and through this movie. Like, to my spiritual people, especially if you practice the African traditional religions, you will love this movie and you will smile throughout the whole movie when you see this, just like I was. I was like, yeah, you did it, Ziggy. You did it. And this biopic was perfect. There was no mess ups, no bad makeup, no bad acting. The music was flowing, the scenes was meshing together, and everything made sense. And I'm finna go ahead and do a comparison and say that the black biopics, the African American biopics, most specifically, y'all need to take note of this. Now, the TLC biopic was good, but as far as some of these others that have come out of the woodworks in the past couple years, y'all need to take note. Because Ziggy Marley, yes, that is Bob Marley's son, but he did his daddy right. He did his daddy justice with this movie. This movie was perfect. A 10 out of 10, 5 stars out of 5 stars. Now, I'm not going to mess it up for the ones who haven't seen it just yet, but I'm just going to give y'all a gist of what the movie was about. So, the movie pretty much starts off as Bob Marley being an adult, and it does go into his childhood and whatnot. But the main thing that I loved about this movie is that it talked about Bob Marley's struggles of being accepted. Because Bob Marley was Jamaican, but he came from a black Jamaican mother and a white father. And he talked about how his father didn't want him because he was too black, he was too dark, and he wouldn't be accepted by his father's family. So his father left him behind. And it kind of left a mark on Bob Marley throughout his life, even as an adult, because he could not understand why his father didn't want him. And then when he met his wife in Jamaica, she was a dark skinned, beautiful black woman. And they connected in the colorism and in the racism that they dealt with in their community, where Bob Marley didn't feel accepted by his dad because he was too black or too, colored for his white dad. And his wife, as a child, when they met, she was saying, well, they call me darky and they talk about my skin being too dark or whatever. So you're not the only one that deals with ostracism. And then, Bob Marley did spend a lot of time in Jamaica because his mother had went to the United States, and she, built her life up. And then his wife's family had done the same thing, because back then, I'm not so sure about immigrants now when it comes to leaving kids behind. I don't hear too many stories about that. But I know, like, back in the days, especially in like the early 1900s, even into like the 70s and 80s and 90s, a lot of Caribbean immigrants, they would leave their kids behind on the islands and leave them there with like their grandparents and other relatives. And then they would kind of scout the United States or the UK out to see, if it was safe enough to raise children there. Then once they got a job and pretty much bought a house or bought an apartment and built their life up, then it would be safe for them to bring the children over from the Caribbean to the States or to the United Kingdom. So I thought that connection was really good. And when it comes to Bob Marley, he was so spiritually in tuned and so gifted. You would have never thought a man as anointed as he was, because they mentioned that a lot too, would deal with ostracism like that, because he dealt with, you know, so much love and biblical truths and Rastafarian truths in his music, that you never would have thought that a man who was all about love and one love and everybody being seen as one would deal with so much ostracism and hate the way that he did. Now, moving along to the father situation, I never knew Bob Marley was shot. Because what happened, and that's what makes this movie so perfect in the timing, is that in Jamaica at the time, and we're talking about like 1960, 70 ish. And at the time in Jamaica, Jamaica was a very violent island. There was a lot of gun violence, a lot of killing, a lot of murders. And it's funny how this movie is coming out now, and you have the travel advisory going on now with Jamaica with the heightened crime rate and stuff. So there's a connection there too. And he was, Bob Marley's an adult. He's a musician. He's talking about his music. He's talking about, how he can pretty much, build his brand, build his career, and things like that. And there were some robbers who had scouted, him out. And then this took place on Strawberry Lane because it said it in the area in Strawberry Lane. This was where his house was. This was a familiar place of his, and this was a popular place where he hung out and pretty much lived his life in. And so these robbers, violent people, they came into his house and they shot him and his manager up. So he was shot. And then they even, found his wife who was in the car, and they followed her into the car and they shot her too. So with everything that was going on, Bob Marley was able to overcome and pull through, and his wife did too. But when he did that love concert, and they give you trivia in the beginning of the movie as well to test your knowledge about Bob Marley. Now, I didn't know Bob Marley was born in the St. Anne parish of Jamaica. I'm familiar with it because I remember I worked at a clinic where the doctor there was Jamaican, and I believe her mother's people or her dad's people were from the St. Anne Parish. So St. Anne Parish, I've heard of them before. And that was where he was born. That's where he was brought up. But one thing that I found familiar, because I could relate to Bob Marley so much by me being, Jamaican, and by me, being spiritually gifted and inclined. And even in my struggles and stuff, like, I'm like, it was meant for me to see this movie, because what had happened was when he got shot, it's not like he was shot by some raggedy ass, rascals or whatever the case may be. These were his own people, fellow Jamaicans that did this to him. And when he had the love concert in Jamaica, it's like the trauma of being shot up the way that he was. It's like every time he would get on stage, he would see the man who shot him face. He was actually a little boy, or like a young boy that shot him. So it wasn't like this was some grown man. This was a kid that shot him. And so it's like every time he would get on stage, he would just be reminded of that little boy. And it's almost as if he would constantly see the face of the little boy who shot him. And it got in him to say, you know what? I got to leave Jamaica. You know, this is not right. I'm not feeling right. So I got to leave Jamaica. And he left and he went to England. I resonated with this when he was shot by the boy, and how even though he tried to push through, and even though he said he loved Jamaica and things like that, he just could not get over the fact that he had did so much for the country of Jamaica, for the Jamaican people, for people, for his community, and someone from his own community shot him up like that. And I know what it's like to deal with that, where you do so much for your community, you do so much for your people, and you do so much for the people who look like you, and they stab you in the back. And they stab you in your heart, and you just can't seem to understand. Like, I look like you. I come from the same land as you. I come from the same lineage and the same bloodline, and you almost murdered me, and you almost killed me, and you almost, killed my whole family. And he had to break away from that, and that's not even just him being a Jamaican, but that's like a human feeling, because a lot of us, not even just in the Jamaica community or in the black community, but a lot of us have been done wrong by our own kind, and we've had to step away from our own kind for a while, because it's like, you know what, I'm not feeling this, because these my people, and we supposed to be good and be together, and y'all about took me out, and I'm over here fighting for y'all and trying to get y'all together. So he left and went to England. The thing I loved about Bob Marley was that he stayed true to who he was, even when it came to his religion. Now, Bob Marley was a proud Rastafarian. If you guys don't know about the Rastafarian movement, it is a real religion in Jamaica. Yes, they do believe in wearing dreads. Yes, they do believe in smoking weed. And they believe that Seli Helasi, who was an emperor in Ethiopia, was the true image or the true son of God because he had hair like wool, as described in the Bible. His skin was brown, like Jesus' skin was in the Bible. And they said even with Seli Helasi's hands, he had the marks that Jesus had when he was nailed on the cross. And so they don't tell you this in the movie, so I'm telling you this. I'm giving y'all a little bit more information because I'm familiar with the Rastafarian people. So, that's a little extra info that the movie don't give y'all. And so that's what the Rastafarian people believe. And the Rastafarian people do believe in God. But they believe that Seli Helasi was a reincarnation of Jesus Christ himself. And Seli Helasi was a real person and he was a real man because he was a emperor in the African country of Ethiopia. And Marcus Garvey, who is one of the founders of, Black History Month. And that's also a beautiful thing about this movie is that it came out in Black History Month. Marcus Garvey, Marcus Garvey was one of the figureheads in the Rastafarian movement. And he believed that all black people should return to Africa because Africa is where our true lineage comes from. And now you understand why Bob Marley had such a fight and had such a passion for going to Africa and doing the concert because that's where his roots were. And so that was a beautiful thing that I loved at Ziggy Marley. Like, Ziggy Marley, you did your thing. You did your daddy right. Like, I know your daddy is like sitting in the spiritual realm and saying, like, that's my child that did me right because this movie, it was perfect. There was nothing out of line. There was nothing incorrect. There was just nothing that was, offensive or controversial. Like, it was just a clean cut movie. Now, moving along to when he went to, England, he did, get into like some different circles, got familiar with the music scene, and he got into like this little punk rock club where he was listening to like the instruments and the guitar. And I believe that this is where his passion for the guitar came from. But he ended up getting arrested, and I believe he got arrested because there's a scene in the movie where he passed by the lion. The lion in the Rastafarian religion is seen as like the mighty king, the symbol of strength, and the symbol of power. And it's funny how he said this. He said it's funny how people walk across this thing every single day and they don't know the significance of it. And that's how it is in the African traditional religions, those who practice Ifa, Isheshe, Santeria, and even voodoo. You guys know that when we go to church and go to, these cathedrals and go to these different places in the world, we know who these people are in our hearts because they're the faces that our spirits were hidden behind in order for us to have our religion and in order for us to have our spirituality. So that was another good connection that I really loved about this movie. And he got arrested, in England because he had ganja or weed. And I believe at the time, I'm not familiar with the laws of England, so I don't know for sure. But, it being illegal, he got arrested. He eventually got out and he moved on. Now, I'm not going to go blow for blow throughout the movie because it's a lot to remember. The movie is 3 hours long, but it's worth it, and it does dabble into him dying from cancer. Now, the things that I love about this movie is the symbols. There are so many spiritual symbols, and the thing is that when he found out in the movie that he was diagnosed with cancer, the day he found out was July 7th, 1977. So the month that he found out that he had cancer was the seventh month, the seventh day, and 77 was the year. In numerology, sevens is a divine number. It's the symbol of Christ, it's the symbol of God, and it's the symbol of unity. So his a lot of people don't want to say that was his destiny, but that was confirmation right there that that was his diagnosis. And that was the confirmation right there that that's how he was going to go. And that was God's will for him. Because I believe the reason why Bob Marley, his wife urged him when he first injured his toe, that his toe, was going black. His toe didn't look good. He needed to see a doctor. I believe in his heart that he knew that that was the way he was going to leave us. That was the way that he was going to leave this earth. And he felt like it was God's will. And I feel like that's why he never went to the doctor, why he never, tried to get any remedies or anything to, alleviate the disease that was in his foot, because he felt like, okay, this is how I'm going to go. It's God's will for me to have this. So I'm going to leave it as is and just let the will of God, take its way with me. And that's what he did. And another symbolism that I did see is that there is an image that keeps coming up in the movie of like the Ring of Fire and this man that's riding up on a horse and Bob Marley running through the wall of fire as a child. Now, in the beginning of the movie, I thought that this man was his father because anytime we saw his dad, he was a white man. He looked like he was an army man, at that time, especially in Jamaica. Because in Jamaica and a lot of places in the Caribbean, you had a lot of the Europeans that was there, that was, buying businesses, tilling the ground and finding, what they could make out of Jamaica and sell it back to Europe. And oftentimes, they had babies with the Jamaican women, or if it was another Caribbean island, that's what they did. They had babies, they had children with them. And I feel like that's what happened in Bob Marley's case. Now, when I saw the constant image of the ring of fire that the younger Bob Marley kept running through, and the man that was mounted on this horse in like the horseman outfit and everything, I thought it was his daddy, because and I thought that maybe his dad wanted to give him a message or wanted to send him a sign or something, and the image of this man really didn't clear up to the end of the movie. And I feel as though this was Jah or God constantly connecting with him and constantly letting him know that this is the path of your life and this is how your life is supposed to go, because we see this image continuously throughout the movie, but the man on the horse never clears up until the end. And some people who are not familiar with Seli Halasi or Rastafarian, they may not know, but the man on the horse was Seli Halasi. And at the end of the movie, when Bob Marley had died, he picked up the little boy and they rode off into the ring of fire, and that was, the end. So I believe it was God or Jesus, Seli Halasi, that came back for Bob Marley at the time of his death, taking him back to the kingdom. So that's what I got from that. Then his wife. Now, I thought this was interesting too about the relationship between Bob Marley and his wife, because I felt like her feelings were very valid as a woman. That we, as we saw her feelings and her love and dedication for Bob Marley play out into the movie, because she was a devoted wife. She had a lot of kids, and Bob Marley, I'm gonna be honest with y'all, he had a lot of kids because he got over 10 kids, and all of them not by the same woman. So there was an image of like this white girl that kept popping up like in the background, and I think that that was his mistress. But I love the fact that Ziggy Marley, he knew how his parents were and how they was, and he didn't embarrass them and bring all that controversial stuff out. We don't know what was in the uncut behind the scenes of what got taken out the movie, but I'm glad he showed it, but he did it with respect, because he didn't want his daddy's image to be more controversial or probably than it already was. Because if you're familiar with Bob Marley and his children, it's a known fact he had a lot of women. He liked women. But I love the fact that they focus on the relationship between him and his wife. And she was a devoted wife. She loved him. She stood by him, took care of his kids. Anything he wanted her to do, she did it. And he was grateful, but she felt neglected in a lot of ways, especially with her role as being his wife. She wasn't catered to, she wasn't nurtured, she wasn't loved, and wasn't like really loved up on as much as she wanted to be. Because there's a scene in the movie where Bob Marley, he's growing in his career. He's, rubbing shoulders with a lot of the executives, and his wife and the other women were known as the Wailers. They were his backup singers, at the time. And there's a scene where they were at the party, and I guess the manager or somebody brought up the idea of changing their name to the I threes, I trees, and he was like, the I trees. He's like, what is that supposed to be? Like, y'all are known as the Whalers, so why is saying y'all new name is the I trees? And so, they looked at him like, I don't know what you talking about or who you think you talking, And so it's like she got an attitude with him and ran out. He chased after her. But I actually like the fact how he checked her too, because she said, "You don't understand what I'm dealing with. I do this for you, I do that for you. All you do is sit around and play your music and be a businessman. Don't come home to me or don't give me what I be trying to give you, which is love and attention and stuff." And he was like, "Well, you can't check me." He didn't say it like this, but I'm speaking to y'all like everyday language. And he was like, "Well, you can't check me because I know about that little dude you be talking to and be flunking around with from time to time in Jamaica. So you can't talk to me about the women I'm with when you got somebody down there in Jamaica that's showing you a good time every now and then." So she was like, and she was honest. And this is what I love because and I'm gonna just be honest, especially I'm gonna just be honest about it. I love the authenticity of the movie, and I love the authenticity of the dialogue and the conversation, but also of their marriage. But I love the fact that as a Caribbean, that aspect came out about not being happy in marriages. It's a known fact that in Caribbean households and in the Caribbean culture, expressing your feelings as vividly as they did in the movie and being as open and honest, it's not welcome like that. And it's not really, talked about. And if things are like this do go on and converse or whatever, it's not brought out in the open. It's something that's more kept in the culture and more so kept, behind closed doors. It just is what it is. And I love how they were just so raw about that. Because I feel like even in our society, as women, especially dealing with men, we need to be honest about getting our needs met too. And that's how she felt. Because she's like, I'm more so of your assistant than I am the wife. And I've been here with you since you was a little boy in Jamaica when you didn't have nothing and trying to make a dollar out of 15 cents singing and stuff. I was there. So, I deserve a little bit more, thank you than that. And so they pretty much talked about that, and she was mad at him a little bit when they was on stage and he came close to her and put his hand. She looked like, "You need to get your hand off of me," because cause she like, "I meant what I said, so you don't need to be putting your hands on my shoulder like that." But they eventually went away from the marriage part. Now I want to deal with the Rastafarianism. I loved how Ziggy Marley gave enough without giving too much, because the Rastafarian religion, it's known in Jamaica and amongst African Americans here in the United States, but the true essence of it is not known, because a lot of times people think that the Rastafarian religion is a bunch of Jamaicans that smoke weed and wear dreadlocks and beanie hats and stuff all the time. That's not the case. Rastafarians believe in the true essence of God, but they believe in his true image. And I love the fact that they talked about how Jesus is black. And in the movie theater I was in, it was some black people in there, but it was some white people in there too. And I love when there's movies like that being played and it's not just us that see it, because I talk about this a lot on my TikTok lives and stuff a lot, how the beauty and the essence of these African traditional religions need to be told and need to be brought out, because what we're saying is true. There's beauty in what we believe in, but there's truth in what we believe in too. And so many people have just demonized this stuff for so long. But I love the fact how Ziggy Marley, he showed these ceremonies and he showed the belief systems without giving it a play by play where people who are not in the faith know too much. So that was the aspect of it that I loved. But I also love the fact how Bob Marley touched on the fact of how he gives so much to other people, but he barely has any time to give peace to himself. And as a spiritualist and as a person who divines and gives to other people, I felt that way too, because I even talked about this today on my TikTok live, how people who are great, people who are amazing, people who are great leaders, teachers, pastors, preachers, ministers, you name it, how we're seen as perfect all the time, and then we're not even allowed to be imperfect, because, oh, you're a man of the cloth, you preach about love, you preach about God, you preach about XYZ, so why don't you have it for yourself? And like I talked this morning on my TikTok live that people in leadership, we go through things too. People in leadership, we deal with real life too. Just because you're anointed, just because you're called and gifted, does not mean that you are exempted from everyday life struggles and issues. And a lot of times, we as gifted people and anointed people, we are called people or chosen people, we have to remind ourselves of that. And that's what Bob Marley realized. But when he went through this transition of being away from his home island, and when he went back, and he even went back to the house that he was shot up in, and it still had the bullet holes within there. And then the funny thing about it is that the little boy who shot him followed him into this house. And when he turned around, when Bob Marley turned around and met that man eye to eye, the guy asked him for forgiveness, and he said, I'm not the one you need to be asking for forgiveness. You need to be asking your creator for forgiveness, because I can't redeem you, but he can. And so I love, and I knew as soon as he got in that house, it was going to be all about forgiveness, because Bob Marley did have to forgive his own people. And even us as African Americans, I know as myself, sometimes we have to forgive our own people, because, like I said, especially when you come from a group of people who have been oppressed, because Jamaicans, they've been oppressed because they dealt with colonization real bad in Jamaica from the British. Because the British had such a hold on them, Jamaica just got free and independent wholeheartedly from Great Britain about 2, 3 years ago. So they've been under British rule for a very long time. And you got to think about it, like the British oppressed a lot of people. Like when it came to Queen Victoria and she came over here to the Western Hemisphere, she did a lot to a lot of people, because people talk about Jamaicans and them wanting to be, light skinned or whatever it came to be. That's who it came from. It came from the British. And even in India, the Great Britons, they colonized India and changed some of the names from Mumbai to Bombay to Calcutta to Kolkata, to make it sound more British like or more proper. And that's why so many Indian people want to be white and bleaching their skin out, because of the British. And you have to think about how you come from an island that's dealt with white oppression already, dealing with a group of people that don't see you as good enough to love, to honor, and respect, but they only see you as good enough to take from and to make money off of. And you grow up with these people and you see their struggles and you're struggling with them and you look just like them and you're struggling with them and going through things, but you're trying to pull them out of their mess while you're going up and leveling up, from yours. And the same people that you're fighting for, which is your own, turn around and do this to you. And and that takes a lot for somebody to come back to the place that hurt them. And in the church and in Christianity, a lot of us hear this message all the time about how we've been hurt, about how we've been forsaken and done wrong. But sometimes in our path and in our destiny, for us to receive our blessing and for us to receive our destiny and for us to receive what it is that God or Jah, whoever we believe in, has for us, we have to go back to the place that hurt us. And that's what he did. And so I love this movie. This movie will always be a favorite of mine. When it comes out, streaming Google Play, I'ma buy it up, because this movie is one for the books. This movie was amazing. It was awesome. It was beautiful. Z Marley, like, you did your dad justice. Like, Bob Marley is smiling down from heaven, like, at this movie. Like, I know he is, because this movie is just so, it's perfect. Like, I have no complaints about this movie. I have no icks about this movie or nothing. This movie was pure beauty. So you guys should definitely go out and see it. You guys should definitely go out and enjoy it, watch it, you know, see what you decipher, see what you think, see, what you believe in this movie. But this movie is one for the books.